Hi everyone, my name is Joliet Junior, and on today's episode of Not Your Average Joe, we're talking with Andy Chlebana, one of America's top pastry chefs and professor of culinary arts at Joliet Junior College. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Joe, powered by Mortgage Message. My name is Joliet Junior, and today we're joined with Andy Chlebana, one of America's top pastry chefs and the professor of culinary arts at Joliet Junior College. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely. So we're so excited to have a local celebrity here in the studios. We were talking a little bit off camera how this journey and this story we're going to talk about today is such an inspiring one, not just for maybe the future culinary stars that are in our community, but just for anybody that has a homegrown story, that has a dream and that they pursue. So just to start, for our audience who hasn't had a chance to connect with you or see on the television, just kind of share with everybody who you are and what you're all about.
My name is Andy Chlebana, and my daytime job is teaching baking and pastry down at Joliet Junior College. In addition to that, I've had an opportunity to do a lot of really interesting things. I've been on Food Network a few times, and I've also competed on some professional teams around the world.
So great. And, you know, Andy, when we kind of talk about right off the bat, Joliet Junior College, I know that's where you went to school for start. And obviously, I believe you traveled to New York thereafter. But let's kind of stick to just that first beginning journey into this profession of yours that you've made an unbelievable mission of. Just talk about kind of starting off in the culinary world.
You know, I've been sharing my story a lot with students lately because, you know, some of them are still kind of not sure about going into the industry. They may not work there, but they know they want to cook. And I tell them, go wash dishes, man. I started out as a dishwasher. You know, you look at your instructors or some like rock stars in whatever industry it might be, and you go, where they were born that way. And it's like, no, I was washing dishes and bussing tables.
Yeah.
And then one morning, I was a goofy kid in high school. Very goofy. I'm proud to admit that.
You're in good company, by the way. Yeah.
And I look back and go, how'd I do all this? And a lot of it was just my dad would always be like, you got to work hard. You got to work hard. And that was kind of the mentality that my brother and I had. My brother's also a chef. So I kind of followed in his footsteps. And one morning he called me up and he goes, hey, you want to work? And then boom, all of a sudden, you know, I'm working for $4.25 at the Pancake House, bussing tables. And then one morning I went into work and it was, hey, we need someone on to cook the meats on the meat grill. And I was like, all right, pay more? Okay. Yeah. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And my mentality as I would work was I wasn't really competitive either in high school, okay? Didn't really – I played sports, but I wasn't any good. And it was like but at work, it was always like I always wanted to be the fastest. I wanted to be – and I guess my competitive side came out with the cooking, and maybe just because that was something that was natural for me. When it came time for college, no clue what I wanted to do, so I followed my brother again, and I enrolled in the culinary arts program at Joliet Junior College. And my third semester, I took a class, and I only took this class to avoid another instructor. So it was either I could take garde and carve vegetables, make pâtés, terrines, things like that, or I could take an advanced pastry class. And there just happened to be a young lady in the class that I was also liked, probably more than pastry at the time. Still like her a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
So I took that class, and all of a sudden things just started clicking, and it was a combination of the science and the art, and that's when I really fell in love with pastry, and then I just kind of made that my track. Then I followed my brother again on to New York to take some more classes after I completed my associate's degree at Joliet Junior College, and then once I graduated, I just started working 4 seasons, moved around to a couple Ritz-Carltons.
Yeah.
It was just a great experience, but none of it was ever given to me. You know, I always had to work for it.
Yeah, well, and I love kind of the journey as you described it as saying, hey, starting from humble beginnings, sometimes starting at that position, you start to learn kind of how the whole operation works, and what a beautiful thing that is to kind of at least, you know, again, you don't start at 100. You start at 0, and you kind of embody that.
And you have to know what the busboy does, because if I owned a place, I can't walk in there and go, oh, the busboy's not here, or just go clean the tables. It's not, you know, it's easy to dumb down any job, but there's a certain amount of skill to do all these jobs and little details that you might miss if you don't get a chance to work in those positions.
Absolutely. So we're going to come back. We're going to come back to Joliet Junior College, because I think it's again, just part of the beauty of your story is where you started and where you still are giving back. But this journey that took you, as you mentioned, from Joliet to New York to 4 seasons, the Ritz-Carltons across the country, kind of speak to that moment, Andy, where all of a sudden the competition side really kicked in with this amazing moment in history where people are so craving content when it comes to baking and pastries, and you were kind of at the foothold of that. Just kind of take us through that journey and what that looked like for you.
It was before I did any of the TV shows. A former classmate of mine from JJC, we started working on the same day. Okay, that's crazy, right? We lost touch because there was no social media, right, when we graduated. But when we got back together at work, it was just like we hadn't missed a beat. And he spent a lot of his time. He was a teacher prior to coming to JJC, and his name is Tim Bucci, and he was big into competitions. And I was like, oh, I always wanted to do this. And I never did it. And then I finally had a chance to start entering these professional competitions. And I had people when I was taking classes, I'd be like, well, how do you get your foot in the door? And everyone's like, just apply. No matter what it is, you apply. And the first competition I did was a little chocolate show up in Naperville. It was like a community thing. And I showed up in my white coat and I won.
Awesome. It's awesome.
But it was like, then you got that one you can put down on the resume that I won one. So now that gives me something when I apply for the next one that I can tell them. And I did a lot of these professional smaller competitions, and in 2008 I did Pastry Chef of the Year. So now I can kind of pop up on Google searches and radar in places. And then all of a sudden, I can't remember how Food Network contacted me the first time, but I think it was a friend of a friend who couldn't take the time away from work to do it, and they called me, and I went through the interview process, and I had a chance to get on the first show. And then there was a pretty big gap between that and the second one, and they didn't know about me. And I was like, oh, I already did one. They were like, how long ago? I'm like 5 years. And they're like, oh, no problem. Nobody remembers those. And I was like, well, gee, thanks. Nobody remembers me. I'm washed up already after 5 years. Right. And a lot of hoops to jump through to get on Spring Baking Championship, because it was like a bucket list thing, right? I want to get on TV. Done. Don't have to do this again.
Yeah.
I did win the first one, and then Spring Baking was interesting because I did not watch Holiday Baking Championship, but everybody else there was like super fans, like, oh my God, they're going to do this for a challenge, and oh, don't do that with your cupcake because we're going to have to do this. And I'm like, I don't care.
Right.
Like, I just want to destroy you all as nicely as possible.
Yes.
And then the third show that I was on, it was something that they were trying to fill a slot, and they were putting together in a hurry, and they called back a bunch of veterans from baking championship shows. So I was fortunate to get to do a third show.
It's amazing. Well, and to your point, I mean, the Google Analytics, it's so fun. Obviously, in preparation of this interview, there was so much content of your journey that we were able to look at. And to your point, I think it took that bold first step at that Naperville event that you decided, hey, yeah, you know what? Let me try to brand myself. Let me try to create a little bit of a story for myself. And I love how you shared that. And I guess just for our audience that's watching, there's a lot of business owners that are watching. Was there ever a fear as far as being on video, as going into studios? I mean, and speak a little bit to, like, you know what, there was something bigger than that fear that you decided I'm going to overcome. I'd just love to hear your take on that.
The first show that I went on, the goal was never to win. The goal was to not do anything, to look like an idiot, right? That was the whole goal. And oddly enough, so we had to make a dress out of sugar on this show. It was a 1-episode show. And I had these like beer pitchers full of sugar, and my head was somewhere else. Altitude, we were in Denver. So we arrived like the day before too. So I was having a little bit of, I wasn't like going to pass out. At one point I almost did, but you're a little lightheaded. And I just looked at the sugar, and I go, it was white. And I go, this doesn't look melted. It looked like the table. And without a glove on, I put my finger right into it, and it was so hot. I burned my finger before the show even started.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, oh, thank God the cameras weren't rolling on that. But yeah, it was just to try and make myself look good. That was all I wanted to do, was just go there, achieve what we wanted to achieve, and not embarrass myself. That was honestly the goal.
Well, and you did it so gracefully. Every show that I had the privy to watch leading up to this interview, everything was so graceful. I think you got a gift of personality, and you've probably heard that before, and just an enjoyable guy to be around. Now, you go through this circuit, just an amazing resume. I want to come back a little bit to your tenure at Joliet Junior College and the pouring into the students that, as you mentioned, trying to be that bridge to build for them, to be able to say, hey, listen, this can be a beautiful career, and here's what I know, and passing down the lessons that you've learned. Just kind of speak to what that program looks like and what it means to you.
It's part of this job isn't just teaching, right? It's inspiring them to to get them to go out and do things. That's why, back to that comment about being a dishwasher, sometimes it's happened a few times this semester where a student, they're not quite like getting the flow of what we're doing in class. They're not quite getting the rhythm because there's a certain pace that you have to work with in a kitchen, and you have to be aware of everything else going on around you, and you got to kind of keep up. So sometimes I said, if they're not working, I'm like, just 2 days a week, man. Anybody downtown Plainfield would hire you for 2 days a week because they're always looking for people.
Absolutely.
And just trying to get them to take that first step.
So, and speaking of Joliet Junior College and inspiring these students, this is a top program, not just regionally, but really this outreach of the program of the culinary arts program at JJC. Just kind of speak about kind of the establishment of how that has brought a great name and has produced just great students and great workers.
And you're right. It's not just locally. I had a Zoom call with a young lady and her father. She lives down in St. Louis. Now there's some good culinary schools in St. Louis. I know instructors down there, and she wants to come to JJC. We've had a student from China and another student from Asia come over. Wow. Like they found us and they came over. I actually spoke to someone yesterday. Said they had somebody from Canada that was looking about coming down here too.
It's amazing,
and it's just it's really interesting. And that in addition to that, we kind of, the students also prove their skill. It's not just word of mouth. It's not just the instructors that are teaching them. It's the students. We've had a student team go on to national several times, and we've had 2 student teams win the national competition, and we've also had 2 individual students compete and win student chef of the year. Wow. So there's really a lot of good things happening, and we have a new building that we just moved into about 5 years ago that is, to me, I know there's a new courthouse downtown Joliet, but I think we're more of a destination people want to go to than have to go to.
Absolutely.
So there's a couple of restaurants down there, and we have a little kiosk. We sell baked goods and sandwiches. So
and I think, again, I mean, from my perspective, being someone that has never been good in the kitchen, I joke around, Andy, I grew up in this Italian family where every single one of my brothers and sisters and my mom and dad are all great at cooking except for me, and I blame them because I was always the taste tester for everybody, and so I got to enjoy the fruits of their labor. But I share that to say there's something special about food. There's something special about the preparation. There's something special about coming around a table and bringing people together through food, and you get to be the provider of that. And I think it's just an amazing gift to the world that you share. And with that passion inspiring students in the next generation, I think that's so much of the reason you were nominated to be a real community hero on the show. Speaking of passion, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, and for our audience to know, what are some of the favorite pastries or dishes that you like to make?
Oh, the favorite question.
Yeah, of course, I know.
That's a tough one. So it for a while it's been the same thing. Now, I always start out, my number one favorite thing, forget what I make, but what I want to eat, are my mom's chocolate chip cookies. And it's, it's just the Nestle recipe off the back of the bag. She can't make it with margarine. She has to use real butter just for me. My brother, I think, gets margarine. Great. You know what I mean? Because you can tell it's in there.
Yeah.
And she loves that I say that. So scoring points to mom.
Yes.
Things that I like to make, like today right now, if you were like, you got the whole day to do whatever you want to do, I would probably bake bread. I just think there's something about it. Your hands are always in it. You're always touching it. It's going to come out a little bit different every time. It's like a child. We're feeding it. We're watching it grow.
It's art.
Yeah, and then we throw it in an oven, unlike we do with children.
Right,
but it's
course,
it's something that's alive, and it's really different. And if I had more time, I'd make some sourdough bread, because then I've got something else that's been alive for months.
Wow.
The other thing I really enjoy making is ice cream, because ice cream and sorbets, frozen desserts, are just all pure science and understanding all the different ingredients and how they work together.
So exciting. Now that we're all hungry here and all of our audience is hungry. We talked a little bit about the past, a little bit about the present. Looking at the future for you, Andy, looking at maybe some events you have coming up this year, or some dreams and goals, because you've really accomplished so much. What does that look like for you, whether short-term or long-term?
There's always something else to do. Just this past weekend, I've been spending all my Thursday afternoons up in DuPage at the Technology Center of DuPage, helping coach their ProStar team, which is a high school level team. TCD is very similar to our Wilco down here, so it's a trade program where all the high schools kind of pool at. And on Saturday, they won the state of Illinois for their cooking competition.
Wow.
And this group of 5, I call them kids, high school, they're all seniors.
Yeah.
I call all my students kids, even if they're older than me, too.
Sure.
They cook, and if you saw what these kids did, it's amazing. They're on folding tables with 2 burners, no stove, no sink, no nothing, and they put out this food that you would just say that's unbelievable.
And that's got to be fulfilling for you. I mean, from the teacher perspective, it has to be fulfilling to kind of see that be realized in these kids and realize now all of a sudden their vision just got bigger.
And you're really watching them come from, I mean, they're competition-wise, they're coming from 0. And we're talking like December to now in March, you're winning the state. The other thing I've got going on is I'm coaching the U.S. Pastry Cup team for an international competition in France. It's called the Coupe du Monde de la Pâtisserie. That's a mouthful.
Wow, yeah. I'll let you say it.
Yeah. We just say the World Cup.
Right.
It is the biggest pastry competition in the world. It's a team of 3 pastry chefs. One is based out of Naperville. And I did this competition 10 years ago. I was the captain. I always said, like, oh, a little guy from Plainfield's captain of the U.S. team. That's pretty cool.
The coolest.
Yeah, and when I originally wanted to try out for the team 6 or 8 years ago, I just said, there's no way that I'll even get on the team. And then to have the opportunity to be the captain of the team was really an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And then to get to go over to France. And it's almost like the Olympics. There's a flag ceremony. We walk in with our flags. There's all this hoopla. You know, if I say a competition over here, you're thinking like kitchens and folding chairs. They built an arena for this thing over there. It's insane.
Wow.
And it's like people over here, I walk past people all the time. Menards is my hot spot in town, by the way, whenever I get recognized. So whenever I'm feeling kind of down, I go to Menards and someone will go, I loved watching you on the show.
That's so great.
Yeah.
That's so great. Yeah, a little bit of that stardom. The other thing that we were talking about before we went live here was something about a Night of Stars. We were talking a little bit about that. Why don't you share what that's about, too?
So our foundation at the college is hosting an event. They do this every year, and they host it for the donors for the JJC Foundation. And these are the people that give money towards the college, you know, small amounts, very large amounts. Mm-hmm. And this is a night to celebrate them. And there's a few other awards given at that event. And this year we're going to be doing the dessert table for it because we haven't really had a chance the last couple of years with COVID to do our other fundraising events and kind of put out a nice little pastry table with some chocolates and cookies and things like that. So we're going to get to do that at the end of April.
Yeah, well, it's so exciting. And I think, again, between this Olympics event, I'm hoping that someone's documenting this when you guys do that. I got to hope that we'll see that somewhere on Facebook or online or somewhere. That sounds so exciting.
Well, you know what's funny about that? If I tell you, I've been on the U.S. Olympic team, and when I say that, everyone's like, what? And it's like, so it's the Culinary Olympics. The one competition in Germany is called the Culinary Olympics. And everybody goes, oh, you cook for the Olympians? And I'm just like...
That's that moment, right?
You're just like, yeah, that's because they want pastries and they're getting ready to run like a 100-meter dash.
That's so good. That's so good. No, you are the Olympian. You tell them, yes, I'm the Olympian.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Andy, like we talked about the excitement over what you bring into the marketplace, what you bring into your students, what you bring into this community. I mean, the Plainfield homegrown story here is just remarkable. You were nominated as a real community hero, and as we come to a close in this interview, I just have to ask you, who is your hero, Andy?
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
I'd say my dad. My dad passed away. My daughters are 19. We have twins. They're 19, and he passed away shortly before they were born. So it's been a while. And that was when things really started coming together for me in my career. I know he can see it all, but sometimes it'd just be great to give him a call and say, hey, Dad, look what I did. And it's all because that whole work hard ethic. That was his 2 things he always said: work hard, have insurance. That was all he would tell us other things, but that was all he would say about work. Work hard, make sure you got insurance.
And what was your father's name?
Robert.
Well, what an amazing guy. It sounds like, because he inspired you to who you are. You've inspired so many, Andy. We thank you for being part of Plainfield and just part of our lives and making us have an enjoyable time around the table. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience for tuning in to another episode of Not Your Average Joe, powered by Mortgage Message. We'll see you next week, everyone. Take care.